Now let's talk about the third pillar. The third pillar is also very challenging. I call it managing the time paradox. What is the paradox? The paradox is that in the real life, if you get old, normally you are less attractive, right? But why would it be different for luxury brands? Why is it that luxury brands, which were famous 150 years ago, 200 years ago, are still attractive to young people today? In fact, this is not easy. To achieve this objective, which is to manage the time paradox, luxury brands need to constantly move forward, as I said before. Another way to say it is they need to innovate on tradition. More precisely, they need to stay true to their essence. They need to respect their uniqueness. They need to stay loyal to their DNA. But at the same time, they need to remain relevant to evolving consumer culture, because the dream is also evolving with the time. The way to do that, obviously, is to constantly move forward, to find often inspiration in the archives, in the past, but to revisit, to modernize, and to develop storytelling which is attractive to people of today, using stories of the past. This is called managing the time paradox, and I will give you now a few examples. To understand how luxury brands can manage the time paradox, can stay true to their DNA, but at the same time stay relevant to evolving consumer culture, one tactic for them can be to play with their codes to stay relevant. And I will show you 2 or 3 examples. On that picture, you will obviously recognize Chanel. And you will see on the left-hand side, obviously, a picture that was very meaningful at the time of Coco Chanel. Coco Chanel herself wearing a jacket like a man, having short hair, wearing trousers. And that was enough to symbolize the DNA of Chanel, a strong woman who was standing up to express her freedom. Obviously, that image is not relevant anymore. So just to give you a funny comparison, not so long ago, Karl Lagerfeld created this fashion show where he displayed top models, demonstrating in the streets of Paris, like modern women, also obviously claiming their rights. And that's obviously a way to play with the codes of Chanel, to play with the concept of being strong, independent in a modern way. Another very different but funny example is with Louis Vuitton. As you probably know, Louis Vuitton has been producing for almost 100 years the most beautiful trunks that a lot of travelers in the 19th and 20th century were using for their long trip and travel. Obviously, they are still producing some trunks today, but the trunk is obviously a little bit less relevant to the short trips and to the plane and to the new modes of transportation. The current creative director of Louis Vuitton had this genius idea soon after he was appointed to reinvent the trunk. So that's the code of Louis Vuitton. But he made it small. He made it a handbag. And he called it with the French word petite, which means small, malle, which means trunk. And le petit malle, the small trunk, was a way to revisit in a playful way, in an elegant way, the old trunk, and to make it a desirable handbag for the customers of today. That's another best practice in innovating on tradition. Another example is with the wine and spirit industry. And on that picture, you can recognize one of the biggest champagne brands, Morriset et Chandon. What is interesting here is that, again, the brand is twisting a little bit one of its codes. You know, champagne, there is a way of drinking champagne. You should not drinking icy, and obviously, normally you should not drink it with ice. However, Moet et Chandon is very conscious that there is today a new generation of millennium and maybe even older consumers who have been strongly influenced, if not brainwashed, by the new culture of cocktails and also white spirits. And it seems that for a lot of these young people, it cannot be cool if you cannot hear the sound of ice in your glass. So what Moet et Chandon did here, which is a way to also innovate on tradition, they developed a special vintage. They call it Moet et Chandon Ice Imperial. Imperial because this is really about the DNA of the brand, and ice because they wanted to try and be relevant to a younger consumer. And basically the message here is Moet et Chandon understands that you may want sometimes to have this cool effect of drinking champagne with ice. And we enable you to do that by developing a special vintage which is made for being drink with ice. Moet et Chandon on ice.